Welcome to another episode of Data Gurus. I'm excited to introduce Daniel Gaynor, who is my guest today. He is the founder of Kelp, which is a company that was acquired by Signal AI almost 2 years ago,
Right?
and is currently also the SVP of strategy for Signal AI. Did I get that right, Daniel?
That's correct. Yeah, we were acquired about 2.5 years ago,
Okay.
and our company has morphed basically into the insights division of Signal AI, which is a decade-old AI company based out of the UK with significant presence everywhere, including in New York City. So really excited to be on with you today and talk about the journey, both coming into Signal AI and then the amazing vision that we joined part of when we became part of Signal AI.
Well, they were early to say an AI company that was founded 10 years ago, right?
Yes, really cutting edge. At
Sure.
that time, it was actually came out of an academic experiment,
Okay.
where our CEO and founder, David Benningson, teamed up with his co-founder who came out of research to better index data. And today, it's obviously become a global phenomenon. For the longest time, media was at best, fax machines, or when I started, literally cutting out newspaper
Yeah.
articles and gluing them into binders. And then, of course, long reliance on surveys.
Right.
And it's very much been a sea change, right? In
Right.
terms of trusting mass quantities of data, millions and millions of articles and blog posts and podcasts and TV broadcasts to guide strategic decision making when it comes to the fickle world of reputation management. So, been fascinating to see that bet pay off in leaps and bounds as AI has captured the imagination of everybody.
Amazing. Yeah, and actually, I wanna dive into your background and then also talk about Kelp and Signal AI. But before we do that, I just wanna get can you just provide an overview of what Signal AI actually does and the clients it serves? You kinda gave a little bit right there, but just like a
Sure.
small overview would be great.
No, sure. In a nutshell, Signal AI is a risk and reputation intelligence company that
Okay.
helps both quantify the impact of all the company's actions on its reputation, but also help those same companies navigate around an emerging world of risk,
Right,
right?
right.
And so, both proactively thinking about the best messages, campaigns, content, activations, executive moments, earnings that you can possibly have to strengthen your perception in the marketplace vis-a-vis your peers. But on the defensive side of the equation, helping to understand case studies, third-party risks, even natural disaster threats
Right.
that might threaten your company's operations as well as its reputation. And
Yeah.
because we are able to source billions upon billions of data points,
Mm.
ranging from earned media coverage to paywalled stuff like the Financial Times to regulatory documents, legal documents, you name it. We're able to have a really broad and really deep understanding of what's shaping the world of industry. And that's why we're trusted by dozens upon dozens of Fortune 500s out there, work on a global scale. Our data is accessible in more than 75 languages and 200 countries. But what I think is the real defensive moat that Signal brings to the table is its technology. And we
Mhm.
have this platform called the AIQ platform that allows us to compliantly and reliably, these are two very important adjectives in the
Yeah,
world of AI,
yeah.
distinguish a signal from the noise, so to speak, to tag Amazon the company versus Amazon the rainforest, to
Right.
distill data just in the city of Boston or this, or Luxembourg
Mhm.
versus the global story. And then to dive deeply into the competitive landscape that your product might be stacked up against or your business unit might be stacked up against, but not necessarily at the corporate level. So that ability to get really specific and really deep on a global scale across a huge, vast array of data sources is, I think, what distinguishes Signal's journey.
Very cool, very cool. Well, let's talk about your journey.
Sure.
I know you have a really interesting background. I'd love to, give us an idea of what you did prior to this point, at least in terms of your career.
Well, I started in the world of politics. So I went to college at Washington University in St. Louis, or WashU, not the one in DC, not the one in Seattle, in St. Louis. We have pride. I then went to graduate school at the London School of Economics, and then promptly tried to find any avenue into the world of politics and public affairs. So my first job actually was at a nonprofit called the Truman National Security Project, working with national security policy experts to craft their thoughts, which were often quite wonky, into thought leadership, like a Washington Post op-ed. From there, I was picked up by the Obama administration as a presidential appointee. My post was actually working as an advisor and speechwriter for the administrator of USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, which nobody had heard of for
And
my
now everybody knows.
entire life. And now all you see are pictures on the front page of the New York Times of them ripping down the signs and closing down contracts. So personal feelings on that are quite sad, but it was a fascinating and incredible professional experience. I worked for the administrator, a guy named Raj Shah, who now runs the Rockefeller Foundation, on everything from public-private partnerships to get vaccines to kids in Africa through the Coca-Cola supply chain, through signing MOUs with countries ranging from, Zambia to Pakistan to improve public health or educate women and girls. Even my big project, which was helping message the Ebola epidemic response when the first case of Ebola landed here in the States. And probably the most fascinating part now with recent events happening, I actually had to write the congressional budget testimony to justify why we should spend $50 billion helping 70 of the world's most vulnerable countries. So it was a fascinating cauldron in which to get trained.
What an amazing experience.
Fascinating. And then from there, because when that administration was wrapping up, you're going to be out of a job.
Right.
I started working on the next one. I joined the governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley's presidential campaign as the policy guy, which was a fascinating ride. And of course, President Trump ended up winning that election. I then pivoted over to the private sector at Nike. So I flew out to Portland, Oregon, which might as well have been another country. It was a real culture shock there. Not only the rain, just everything, but it was obviously an incredible experience working in the inner circle of the world's most notable brand. Helped start a new team there called the Nike Narrative Center of Excellence, which worked to coordinate brand activities with corporate activities. Because at Nike, the tennis team is its own multi-million-dollar business, and the basketball team is its own multi-billion-dollar business, let alone the sustainability team or the investor relations team. So working directly for their CEO and CFO and CCO helped to coordinate an overarching brand narrative that connected all the various strands of Nike's expression to the world, ranging from standing on a Formula One racetrack at 5 a.m. with 3 of the world's fastest marathoners trying to run the first 2-hour marathon, to announcing their DTC pivot, the consumer direct offense, which doubled down on digital channels. An incredible learning experience. Then over to Weber Shandwick, which is the world's largest publicly traded marketing and communications firm, was able to start a new practice there about narrative strategy and analytics, like connecting the corporate strategy with your storytelling strategy. So doing that with everybody from IBM to Johnson & Johnson taught me that there are these consistent storylines that every company is campaigning on. We all want to be renowned on the road to net zero. We all want to be seen as a great place to work. We all want to be seen as putting our customers, our stakeholders, our patients first. But how can you use the proof points that you authentically are doing as a business and propagate them in a way that distinguishes your narrative versus your competitive set, and do that consistently? That gave me the idea to team up with my brilliant co-founder, Shan Biglione, and start a company called Kelp Data, where we were the first platform to quantify corporate reputation, to index hundreds of companies across hundreds of topics using millions of global data points to understand not only where you rank reputationally, but more importantly, give strategic guidance in terms of what to do about it. And as we were looking with different technology and data partners to team up with, we were blown away by Signal AI's platform because it didn't rely on that outdated Boolean keyword stuff. It actually was using real AI, discriminative AI, to tag and label huge amounts of data. And we saw that very much as like the nitro in the engine. So when we teamed up with them, we were able to take Signal's data and provide really deep, in my view, industry-leading insights to both amplify reputation and navigate around risk proactively.
Very cool. So let's talk about Signal AI. I'm fascinated about, obviously, data is the new oil, right? Everybody, and obviously, is what you said, sourced ethically, it's legal, right?
Yep.
Compliant in terms of privacy. But how does Signal AI deal with that with so much data? Can you kinda give us a way that they manage and tag the data, just a flavor of that? Because it obviously, AI plays a big role in that, but are there frameworks? Are there give us a little bit of an idea on that one.
Yeah, I would answer it in three core words: strategy, licensing, and technology. I'll
Okay,
touch on all those really quickly.
okay,
From a strategy standpoint, Signal thinks about the world in terms of making sure you are the best among your competitive set. While
okay,
it's very helpful if I'm at Nike to understand what Amazon is doing, say on carbon capture or
right,
renewable energy, they're not necessarily my direct competitor.
sure,
Adidas is, Under Armour is, New Balance is. And so what we're able to do is create industry specific frameworks, your own competitive set, if you will, that allows you to index how you're doing versus your peers. So whether it's comparing Takeda Pharmaceuticals to Novartis or it's comparing Nike to Adidas, that index looks very different depending on what companies you are benchmarking yourself against and what topics that you are analyzing. In other words, we're able to create something that's highly specific to your particular industry. And even
right,
cooler, from a strategic perspective, we're able to help individual business units at big companies stand apart. So, as an example, Pfizer corporate would look very different in the data than Pfizer oncology, which
right,
competes against AstraZeneca oncology, but not AstraZeneca, say, corporate. And that allows us to create really sharp insights that help you plan your editorial calendar, think about content differently, leverage executives in a more strategic way, et cetera. From a licensing standpoint, one of the reasons that Signal is really excelling right now is that for over a decade, it's been focused on compliance.
right,
Anyone who has read a New York Times article recently will see a mention of OpenAI and a big asterisk.
yeah,
OpenAI is in a lawsuit with the New York Times because OpenAI literally copies articles from the New York Times and feeds them back to you. Signal goes and cuts deals with content providers, over 10,000 different premium paywalled providers that
right,
other aggregators wouldn't necessarily have access to. So the data never gets cut off.
got
The
it.
data is reliable. And importantly, this is the big distinguishing factor. We don't use the data to replicate and then train our own systems.
I
We
see,
use the data to get more reliable information, but we're
right,
not training our own large language model to basically plagiarize an article and feed you back the same content. And so when it comes to our technology, we think about fusing two different families of AI. Now, we're all transfixed by one form right now, generative AI, which is really good at predicting the next word, the next pixel, the next note of music, the next frame of video. But
right,
there's another family that we've long been grounded in here at Signal AI, discriminative AI, which excels at tagging and labeling and segmenting.
got it.
So when you put the compliantly licensed data together with discriminative and generative AI, it means that we're grabbing the most accurate lake of data for your question. We're using discriminative AI to call out the companies, the topics, the geographies, as well as a variety of metrics like the volume of coverage, the sentiment of the coverage, how salient you are in the coverage. And then we use generative AI to make sure that it's as accessible to you as ChatGPT outputs. It will come to you in a quick set of bullets. It will come to you in a instantly appearing chart versus you having to click all those buttons. And that's sort of where we're headed right now. It's something called Ask AIQ, and it's our version of a trustworthy information exchange chatbot, but with compliant data that not only we've licensed, but is not prone to hallucinations.
Very fascinating, and I guess that's the 10 years of building the appropriate taxonomy, using the appropriate AI to be able to tag the data and scrub it appropriately so you can put it together with the generative AI.
What company out there isn't AI powered at this point? And
I
by the way, even on LinkedIn, people will say, I'm an AI powered insert, which I think is hilarious. It's sort of like 5 years ago, would you say I'm internet powered? Or 10
I
years ago, would you say I'm Microsoft Word powered? But what I think is really fun and elicits a chuckle for us here at Signal AI is this is not a Chat GBT wrapper. This is a natively built AI platform ingesting data that we have licensed
right.
so that we can operate at the highest levels of company. And that's why I'm so proud we work with, so many C-suites around the world, because if you want to make a multi-billion-dollar decision based upon this data, you've got to make sure the data is accurate and trustworthy and consistent. And that's very much been the core of our strategy all along. We also acquired another company last year, Social 360, which was long running the best premium social source out there. So obviously there's this huge fire hose of content from, say, an X or an Instagram. You're just not sure who's a bot versus who's a real person. Social 360 really excelled at saying, here's like the 10% that are truly influential. Who are the influencers and the outlets that are really shaping the conversation, who, by the way, are real human beings. And when we take Social 360 data and integrate it into Signal's data and platform, we now have this really comprehensive solution, ranging from gray web sources to social channels to premium paywalled channels. So it's been incredibly fun for me and our team to play around with.
Fascinating. Let's talk about your clients. In
Yeah.
this day and age, there seems to be always the latest and greatest kind of topic that a company needs to deal with, whether, in light of the DEI initiatives that have been abandoned or kind of deprioritized to sustainability. Like, what are
Mhm.
you seeing within these Fortune 500 clients? How are they dealing with this? It feels like a fire hose that they have to deal with.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say you wouldn't believe how many of these conversations I have, but I think you probably would. Every
Yeah,
single day, I'm on with a Fortune 500 company asking, how do we deal with this whiplash? How do we stay true to the values that we've long committed to around diversity, equity, and inclusion, around sustainability or commitment to renewable energy, around operating in a global footprint?
right,
And just because the administration changed doesn't mean that our company's strategy has changed. I mean, look no further than the electric vehicle industry,
right.
which has planted billions and billions of dollars of a bet on EVs,
Yeah,
only for, interestingly, the creator of that industry to fight for taking away EV subsidies. Should Ford just abandon the Mustang Mach-E? I don't know. I don't think so.
right,
And so what we get asked to do is help companies think about this from two angles.
right,
First, the industry angle. What is the macro context in which we're operating? Because no matter how big, how sophisticated a company is, we're all prone to navel gazing. It's simply not possible to treat every single one of your peers with the same level of depth of analysis as you would yourselves. So we very much offer this value prop of equal levels of breadth and depth across an industry, ranging from big pharmaceutical companies to big consulting companies to big CPG companies. I can give you a few examples in a second.
right,
The second element of this is to really understand to what degree your narrative is something that you, by gut instinct, think is the right thing to put out to the world versus you are targeting in terms of what are the most resonant messages out there. So, for example, at Nike, I always had one narrative pillar that was innovation. Well, the
right,
truth is that everybody is campaigning on innovation. So what
right.
they'll come to us for is to say, what are the most resonant proof points week after week, month over month, year over year that I can continuously push forward in the market, that I can propagate as the best articulation of our commitment to, in this case, innovation, so that I can continuously stand out from the pack. And you can apply that to DE&I and talent and promotions. You can apply that to your road to net zero and your commitment to sustainability and power purchase agreements and anything in between. So, to recap, what is an industry view in terms of the big themes shaping the landscape of our industry, which are necessarily different depending on what business you're in? And then, second, how can we continuously optimize our narrative to intersect with those industry opportunities? And so, just to give you two quick examples, we work with Takeda Pharmaceuticals, which
Okay.
is Japan's biggest life sciences company and actually the biggest one in Massachusetts, which is like the hub of biotech here in the States. We also work with KPMG, one of the world's big four consulting companies. In Takeda's case, they want us to analyze their distinctive positioning themes, their particular narrative pillars with their own particular definition. Their version of innovation, for example, is more about manufacturing and quality assurance and optimization. It's might be different from another life sciences. So we had to create their own custom narrative construct and literally stack together new topics that we train the AI to recognize into this big Russian nesting doll that would, in data terms, represent what they mean as their version of innovation. With KPMG, it was something slightly different. They wanted to bring in an element of assessing companies on trust, not just financials, when they do audits. So they have the ability to look at reputational Achilles heels as well as fiscal issues in the balance sheet. And what's really cool about that is we're able to take that to market with KPMG and say, here's a proprietary approach that we co-developed with one of the world's premier consulting firms to quantify your trustworthiness on your supply chain, with your customers, on ESG issues, even when it comes to product quality, and then combine that with, of course, their typical financial analysis that they excel at. So, two cases where we're really customizing the definition of what the data gives you because of the agility of the technology.
Very cool. And given the agility of technology in the world, are you seeing I mean, I feel like the trend over the last 10 years has been quite apparent in that consumers can shift perception so
Mm,
quick. And I feel like that's largely different from any time period we've had in history. I shouldn't say consumers' perceptions shift quickly, but it just is expedited because you do one tweet or you make one post and it can go all over the world in
mm.
terms of influencing a company's brand. Ha
Which is why most reputation divisions,
Yeah,
comms and marketing in particular, are getting increasingly risk averse. And yet, to your point, you need to be bolder than ever.
right,
And what I think is really exciting is that I'm seeing different C suite executives across industries use our platform not to create content, which is
right.
how we assume Gen AI is being used, but instead to shape strategy,
Okay,
to truly lean into a more resonant, a more provocative message that is a truer and more authentic expression of your product's capabilities, your values as a company, or any other corporate proof point.
right,
And instead, what we're seeing just across industries with this uncertainty, the new
yeah,
administration, the electoral changes across various democracies is this retrenchment towards defense. There's this big trend going on in the ESG world called green hushing, which I'm sure you've heard about, which is let's take any ESG reference off our website. Let's hide the fact that we've invested in renewable energy or anything in between. Certainly, you've seen this strike DEI quite hard. I mean, Zuckerberg took out certain bathrooms
right,
at Meta headquarters, and what that is going to lead to, make no mistake, is a sea of sameness because everyone, like a meerkat, is ducking underneath the ground. And what I think is really, really cool and exciting is to think about this more in terms of offense. If you can use AI and technology to preemptively assess whether or not a storyline, a campaign, an executive, or any other public moment will resonate well, that it
right,
is, in fact, quantitatively attacking a white space that no one has planted their flag on, then the better chance you have to convince the higher ups, let alone your peers across function, to actually take that bolder leap and to
right.
go in a strategy that truly differentiates you. And so the very human element here that I hadn't anticipated in starting my company was that data was going to be used to drive collaboration. It's not just about proving you're doing a good job and fighting for a promotion. It's actually about getting operations, marketing, sales, HR, finance, investor relations all on the same page by uniting those guys on a single source of truth, allowing the company amid a very disruptive time to still go on the offense and distinguish itself versus its peers.
Yeah, I'm glad you confirmed that because I would imagine there's a lot of companies who don't want to be caught in the crossfire. And to your point, you have to still be bold and share your message. And obviously, with Signal AI, you can get information and insight that helps you ensure that you're going down the right path.
And you made this point. You said, listen, one tweet, wrong
Yeah,
or right, could completely shape reputation. And that's very much sort of like, the fear element we all
right.
fear in our gut. But that same exact point can be used opportunistically.
That's true.
If we know the right influencers to target,
Right.
the right stakeholder groups that can amplify our message, the right members of Congress, even, we can operate with fewer, deeper punches in the public sphere, and we can operate much more efficiently as a function. So I encourage folks to think about using this for strategy creation and optimization, not just how can we duck all the bullets flying these days.
Yeah. So what the future is in reputation? Like, I hear what you're saying now, like everybody needs to manage this, but do you see a time where measuring reputation, minimizing risk is in a different kind of context?
Yes, I do. I think it's the agentic context. So we're hearing about this all the time, AI agents.
Right.
We are releasing our version of that right now, called Ask AIQ, which is very much a coworker of yours. It is in the classical definition of copilot
Right.
that does analysis for you and even makes recommendations in terms of how to act. And that's where this is headed, right?
Okay.
The first phase of reputation management, so to speak, was asking people their opinion. That's
Right.
called surveys, and that goes back to the days of Babylon.
Right.
Then we saw the advent of media monitoring, which was the ability to ingest large sums of data that we realized pretty quickly were overwhelming. And there's been this tension between the agencies and the consulting firms, which operate on smooth talking and great storytelling, but ultimately gut instinct, versus
Right.
the data companies who couldn't necessarily distill a signal from the noise. They
Right.
couldn't
Well,
get to that
yes.
or human layer.
Yeah.
The new phase is the intersection of those two. The
Right.
new phase is us hiring industry experts, not only in terms of function, like communications experts, but industries as well. So we've hired folks from life sciences and manufacturing and big tech and automotive, and they're helping train our system to think like an industry expert in, say, the automotive world or the airline world, you name it. And then that's going to train your own digital coworker, a AI agent who's going to be able to comb through the data, produce the charts that you want, create the briefings, the decks, the other outputs that you might want, and be able to give you years worth of analysis on a daily basis. So you can have that pulse check with the reliability of a heft of information behind it. And that's where we're headed. So I'm very excited to see the release of AIQ impact a variety of folks across industries. We're currently working with chief comms, chief risk, chief marketing officers across dozens of fields. And that will only get sharper over time as, of course, those individual users help train new use cases in the system.
And what do you see happening within the corporations that are gonna have this new digital coworker, if you will, or copilot? How does that change the organization landscape in terms of how they think about their role and their value add?
I'm very excited about this from a talent standpoint and a collaboration standpoint. Let me start with talent.
Okay.
One of the things that I've been proudest of in building our company and building the division within Signal is that we've hired folks from really diverse and unexpected backgrounds. I feel like we've been able to bring on so much untapped talent. We have analysts who were previously bench scientists or studying the brains of fruit flies, or were campaigning against big tobacco, or were political fundraisers, working in communications, you name it. And they are shaping the product as much as the engineers are. So I think bringing on a more diverse array of talent, both in terms of backgrounds and experience, is going to be essential for corporations who are training their own version of these agents, who are building their own co-pilots, because without bringing on those diverse backgrounds, you will inherently have blind spots. So that's the first piece of it.
Right.
Um, and then what I think is really exciting is that we're going to see the primacy of certain corporate functions wax and wane within a company. As an example, for the longest time, comms has not been in the room. Comms is given the strategy and they say, write a press release about it. But that dichotomy is really shifting. For the first time ever, corporate communications, corporate affairs, reputation management, whatever kind of function that is able to walk in with a quantifiable assessment of how it is, in fact, benefiting the bottom line. They are able to quantify reputation and point to the levers that they pulled, the messages they put out, the activations they deployed in the world that actually effectively lifted the reputation of the corporation, putting them on the same page as sales that can talk about revenue numbers and marketing that can talk about impressions and investor relations that can talk about investor sentiment. And so I think that we're going to see this real like equalizing factor when it comes to managing risk and reputation across a company. There's going to be a layer of truth that hopefully a company like Signal can provide. And then how that truth is acted on is up to the individual expertise of those functions. So operations might go and try to cut down scope 3 emissions, and marketing might do a great campaign with Greta Thunberg to talk about cutting those emissions. But nonetheless, knowing that is a white space to attack, both to prevent risk as well as distinguish yourself reputationally from your peers is where we're headed. So to answer again, we are going to see a world where everyone is data driven, where more people are data literate, and where data above gut decision making is what's driving big corporate shifts.
Yeah. And creates collaboration within the organization.
Absolutely.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining me today. Fascinating, the work that you do. It's amazing because the amount of data that people have access to be able to distill it and drive strategy for clients is really the, what is needed for the future, quite frankly, because there's too much data out there.
I would end on a really like optimistic note, which is like every communications professional, I failed math a lot. I think I failed algebra 1 like 4 times. I think I was historically one of the worst math students at Belmont Hill, where I went to high school. And if I can do it, imagine what the listeners of this program can do. So no longer in this agentic age will you have to run your own Excel. I know you were talking to me about figuring out how to dust off the cobwebs on VLOOKUP. And no longer will you even have to log into a thing and click buttons.
Yes.
In the future, data will be so accessible that you will see it in a synonymous context as email. It's just a thing that you interact with every single day. AI, in other words, is just talking software.
Right.
And what I would challenge folks who are listening to this program to do, whether you're working with Signal AI or the myriad of millions of other AI vendors, is ask one operative question, which is, how can I make this my own? Right? I've seen how corporate communications experts can really shape the development of an industry-leading AI product. And so can risk professionals and any other types who are not classically coders. And so I would just impress upon anyone listening to this to think that they themselves can help co-develop the products that they're using, whether they build them in-house or they're buying them externally. And that's probably the proudest part of my journey, to see the impact that we're able to make, because AI is so flexible. It really is, at the end of the day, a manifestation of your own brain, your own decision-making, your own values, your own gut instincts, but quantified, repeatable, reliable, and tireless. And for that reason, I'm really excited about using this in a variety of corporate contexts ahead.
Awesome. And I love that suggestion of do the co-investment, make it your own, make it the company, like invest in making sure that the AI has your context when you're using it. So good suggestion.
Right. Not just how do I use this thing,
Yes.
but how are you going to help me use this thing in as frictionless a way possible? And I think that's really the key to experimentation. Thank you so much for having me on. Glad we finally got on the horn
Yes.
here, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. I will say, if folks want to get in touch with me, they can look me up on LinkedIn. Daniel Gaynor is my name, work at Signal AI. I'm dan.gaynor, Gaynor, at signal-ai.com.
And if you don't remember that, you can get in touch with me and I can make an intro for you guys.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.